Our brother Khalil, tell me about your journey to Islam. How did it start?
Well, I come from a family from the Caribbean, from a very small island called St. Lucia, which has a population of about 120,000 people, a very small place. But I was born in London, and we were a Catholic family. My mum and dad are still Catholics today. And I remember during my young time going to church and always believing in a God, and always believing that God had some impact in our lives. But there were certain things, for example, my mother didn't used to go to church. And one of the reasons she stopped going to church is because she had seen the priest who was on the altar. He was drinking the wine, and he was actually drunk on a day that he was giving the sermon. So my mother was disgusted by that, and for years she didn't actually go to the Catholic Church. Myself, I saw one day a man who desperately needed help walking down the middle of the aisle, and the priest was asking the altar boys, these are the people assisting the priest, he was asking them to he was asking to get the guy to sit down. And I was a small child of 7, 8 years old, and to me it was obvious that this man needed something. He needed compassion. They needed to stop the sermon. He needed to stop talking and attend to what this man had. And even as a young child, I found it very strange that there weren't any compassion.
Is it the same priest?
Yes, it could have been. No, I think it was a different priest, a different time. And I think the third thing as a Catholic was this question of confession, going and telling a man that you had done so and so and so and so. And my father used to take us to confession as young boys, and we used to have to, say what we'd done wrong to a priest. And it just so happened on the occasion that my brother was going to go and do his confession, he opened up the wrong door. And he opened up the door with the priest who was waiting to hear on the other side the person whose confession. And the priest, to put it very plainly, wasn't very well dressed. This was startling to me. I was about 11, 12 years old. So I'm not saying at all that this is the experience of everybody, but these three experiences that I've quoted left enough doubt in my mind that perhaps this wasn't the way it should be, and there were things wrong.
Yeah, but badly behaving men of religion exist in every religion, don't they? I mean,
absolutely, and this is one of the dilemmas, and we'll get into that. When I came to Islam, I saw, before I came to Islam, I saw religion as the root of all evil. There was the island conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland. There was what's going on in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine, and so I saw religion really being at the center of all problems, of all conflict. And it wasn't really until I started examining what are those religions actually saying.
Yes, what triggered that?
That's right. Well, I think for me, I wanted to go deeper and find out more about not just what people were doing. And I was always a person, I didn't really like following people. I always had my own mind. I decided I wanted to do things my own way. And so I decided to look carefully into what those individual religions were offering. And I put a pencil mark by Islam, and I thought I'll get to that sometime and have a look, but I'll go and look.
What did you start with?
Well, I started obviously with Christianity, and I then went to Buddhism, I went to Hinduism, I went to all the isms that were somehow, involved in religion. And to my mind, I felt they're following a man. They're following a man. Whether it be Christ, whether it be Buddha, whether it be the Hindi and the Gandhis, of course excluded me as someone who didn't come from that area. So there was problems of all the religions that I looked at. And like I said, I put a pencil in Islam because I think I was more concerned that, that maybe, this Islam, which it seems to be causing so much problems around the world, maybe they was, as some Christian religions were saying, maybe this was the devil religion. Maybe this is religion which, the Antichrist, the one that was against the truth. But as growing up as a young black person in the UK, there are many influences on your identity as a black person. And so therefore, we were looking to Martin Luther King, we were looking to Malcolm X, we were looking to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, etc. Tommy Smith standing in the 1968 Olympics with the Black Power signal. So all these things had an effect on me as a child. And when I decided to look at Islam, I was startled. I was really startled by it.
How did the process start?
The process started as a journalist. It started as a journalist looking into the book and examining what the beliefs were on the basis of the things that I read. And I was, at that time, appalled. I was appalled by the fact you could marry 4 women. I was appalled that some of the ayahs in the Quran, and I looked at it very much as I thought, an objective journalist.
You had been working as a journalist?
Indeed, I started working for the BBC when I left school, and during that time I was trained as a reporter for the BBC, and I moved in from radio into television, and so.
So this was another investigative sort of story.
Indeed it was, and so during that time, I was, you see, continually searching for what is the truth. What does God want from us? You know, what is this really? Does it really have to come via a man? And of course, I thought that Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was like any other person. You know, religion came via Isa or Jesus, and via Buddha. I thought, well, the religion must come via Muhammad. And when I found this out, it was beginning for me to distinguish Islam and distinguish. But it wasn't until I went as a journalist to Gambia in West Africa, and I met what now is a very close brother of mine in Islam. And I saw him with his family. He had a lot of children in the yard. He was living very basically, very simply, etc. And we got into a conversation. And that conversation was about your Islam and religion in general. I told you I was just an anti-religion person.
Were you there doing something for the BBC?
I was making a documentary for the BBC on a boxer called Nigel Benn, a middleweight boxer, and he had a manager who was from the Gambia. And so I went to the Gambia to trace the roots of the manager and Nigel Benn, and I met Yunus as he was there. And so I got into a really spirited conversation. I'd read the Quran as a journalist. I'd underlined the things I didn't like. I could quote the ayahs from it. And the thing about it is every time we got into a real conversation, I loved having these debates, this man would withdraw from me and say, excuse me, and he'd go away to a standpipe in the corner of the yard, and he would wash himself. He'd wash his hands and his face, and he'd throw himself on the ground. And I thought, that's extraordinary. You know, why does he have to do that now? We're in the middle of the debate, you know. There must be something powerful that allows somebody to go and do that. And I was confused. I was confused about the power that.
You didn't ask him why he was doing this?
Of course. I knew what Islam was about. I knew people prayed 5 times a day, but to see it in practice and to see that our conversation was interrupted by someone who was determined to do something more important than this.
So he was interrupting the conversation in order to pray.
He was.
I see. Okay.
And I found that extraordinary. I found that, you know, we were right in the throes of something very important to discuss.
Well, you must have been spending hours.
Well, yes, I was determined to convince him that he'd made a big mistake, that he had chosen a religion that was a load of nonsense. And
was he a convert?
He was.
He was.
He was a convert.
Okay.
And so I was determined to tell him and to convince him he needed to leave Islam, because all religions, regardless of what they were, were the source of evil and trouble as far as I was concerned at that time. And I tried all I could to persuade him he needs to give up this Islam thing that you're talking about.
And then?
And then he asked me some very simple questions, of which, you know, as a journalist, working for the BBC, you believe, or at least I did that time, I know everything, and if I don't know it, I can find it out. You know, there was a kind of arrogance about, you know, what we thought about the world, and we'd seen so much as a journalist, and so he asked me some basic questions, you know, about the concept of the three. You know, why were we saying that we were not committing shirk, as I understood it? They're taking partners with God when there were three, and I found
so
that,
it's the issue of Trinity.
yeah, yes, I found that difficult. Not that I was supporting Christianity, because again, religion for me, all religions were problematic. But I was trying to say to him, well, your religion is no different to the Christian religion. I was using Christianity as a way of forcing him in my argument.
He was putting you on the defensive. You were putting him on the defensive.
Exactly, exactly. In fact, I don't think I was putting him on the defensive very much. He was putting me on the defensive most of the time. And then he asked me a very simple question, and that question stays with me today. And that is, why? What's the reason that you are on this earth? A very simple question. And of all the years of being a journalist, intelligence and being able to answer questions, and I couldn't answer that question. There didn't seem to be anything that made logical sense in answer why we were here, why were we created, what's the purpose of all of this. And he said, and he was very confident, he said, I know. And I was fascinated. You know? How comes I don't know? You know, and I'm a journalist of standing and all this kind of thing, and you know? Yes. So he quoted the ayah, of course. وَمَا خَلَقْنَا
وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ.
And that ayah was for me a paradigm shift. It was as though a veil had been removed. And yes, it just made sense. I wasn't going to worship a man. I wasn't going to take the teachings of a particular area of the world. I was going to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only reason that Allah made us here was to do exactly that. And so it all made sense. It all made sense.
You know, you cannot but feel really sorry for people who don't come to this realization, because our life would be in vain. What's the point of living all these years, making money, making a name, become famous, having children, having property, and then you just die and that's the end?
Well, that was my question. How could it be like that? What sense was there in that? So
did you embrace Islam there?
Well, in my heart I did.
But it took you a while afterwards.
No, not that long. I came... Basically, I started asking questions as someone who's interested in Islam, and Yunus could see that. I started asking him, so when you pray, what exactly do you say? And he said, well, when you become Muslim, you'll find out. So he was saying things to me that was really quite challenging, you know. So I went to his son and I said to his son, when you pray, what do you do? Of course, he said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Of course, I didn't understand any of that and didn't remember any of that, but I remembered the Bismillah. And I asked him what that meant, in the name of Allah. And so when I left Yunus, and you see, you have to understand that a Muslim is a brother to his Muslim. There's certain people that you see yourself in them, you know, and this is what I saw in Yunus. I saw myself. And so whilst it would sound harsh to say to people what he said to me something which I couldn't turn my back on. And he said to me, well, now that you know what Islam is all about, yeah, if you leave and you decide to turn your back on Allah, then essentially you're a disbeliever, you're a non-believer. And that frightened me.
It becomes a burden.
It did. I never saw myself as a disbeliever in God. I didn't see that. And if I was not going to embrace Islam, it meant I was being, you know, disobedient to God. So
you went back to London with this sort of thinking?
I did. I arrived in Manchester. And as soon as I arrived in Manchester, I knew I had to change my life around. And I arrived in Manchester just as it was Christmas time. And the family were waiting for me to come back and spend Christmas with them. I stayed in Manchester. I stayed in Manchester and I realized I needed to pray. I had no idea what the direction of prayer was. I had no idea what time the prayer was. I just knew I had to pray. And so I faced a direction, and I remembered what Yunus's son had told me, Bismillah, Bismillah.
So you kept saying it?
And I just kept saying it. And I saw Yunus, because Yunus had was making the movements, going up and down and up and down. Yeah, I thought, at the beginning, I didn't realize there were only 2 sajdas. I was doing 3 because I thought
that's Maghrib.
I misjudged it. But, I eventually decided I was going to take Shahada formally, my Shahada, and I went down to London in Cricklewood Mosque.
Oh.
Back in 1992. And found a very, very spirited.
I used to live right next to the mosque.
Right. Okay. So we passed each other.
When was that? Which year was
1992.
that?
1992. The end of 92. The beginning of 93.
Yeah, I was there in Harrow Road.
All right. Okay.
Not Harrow Road. It's called the road of the mosque itself. Howard Road.
Howard Road. Absolutely. Road. Yeah. So I
was at number 9.
I took my Shahada there. Yes.
Now, what was the family's response?
Well, initially the family were perplexed, but my journey had been through trying to find my identity as a young man, and so I'd been looking into Rastafarianism. I'd been looking into things as it's black nationalism and other things. So I had gone through a journey, and then now I'd come to a point where my family said, well, yeah, he'll leave in a few days, don't...
They thought it was just another adventure.
Just another phase. So my father was very interested, my father. My mother, after a while, thought, are you not going to leave this stuff, you're doing? She became very angry. And the friends around me, I no longer felt that they had my worldview. They had the same views as I did. But of course,
Did you lose friends?
Yes.
As a result?
I went to the BBC, and essentially within 1 year I left the BBC. And I was always told, well, why did you leave the BBC? Because I no longer felt I could pretend. Yes. I'm not saying that being a journalist is about pretending. It's not, but it is about embellishing things. It is about writing the story to the strength, as we were told. So there was an element of untruth in what I was doing at the BBC, and
there was some sort of disillusionment.
There was definitely. I used to do very scary, high-profile kind of programs, documentaries, going into drug dens and dealing with really difficult social problems, and I lost the desire to, if you like, exploit people. I felt that's what I was doing now. I felt I was now as a journalist. The story was not simply because I wanted to tell the story to help the person that I was telling the story. At that time, I was telling the story so I could get a name for myself. You say, well, that was a great story,
Well, that's what the media is about.
Well, and I felt that was dishonest. I felt I could no longer do that. I'm still a journalist, and I think I've changed my attitude towards the coverage of the things I write about, and leave the privacy to people, and not try and get a sensationalist story. I think I've changed my attitude towards that.
But you leaving the BBC had nothing to do with the way the BBC acted towards you.
No.
It's just that yourself.
Yes. It was an independent decision that I made, that I could no longer... well, you see, I was presenting program. I presented a program back in 1991 on BBC Two. I was presenting a program called Hearsay. It was a chat show. And I was looking at the time, before I embraced Islam, to get other presentation jobs. So I applied for That's Life. I applied for Good Morning Britain. I applied for all these, and thinking that, I could go on and continue presentation.
I remember That's Life.
Yeah. Well, Esther Ranson, right?
I used to love it.
I applied for all those jobs. I didn't get them, but I worked also. I applied for a job on Radio 4. I worked on Radio 4 as well. So it was a case of saying, do I continue trying to, get a name for myself, or was it more important now for me to think about, the new worldview, the new direction, and, trying to understand what Islam was about and trying to help people, trying to be part of a community.
Now, when I speak to you in Arabic, you speak with a Sudanese dialect. Where did you pick it from?
Well, yes. What happened?
I thought you were Sudanese
Right,
initially
yes.
when we met first.
A lot of people do think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was looking for somewhere after I embraced Islam. I was looking for somewhere to go and learn Arabic. I was looking for somewhere to go and learn a bit about Islam. And so I was told through friends of mine who remain dear friends until this day, that Sudan was an option. That they had an international university there where people were learning Arabic and learning religion, and I decided, well, why not? Let's give it a go. So the course was for 1 year to learn Arabic, and then I was thinking I'd come back to the UK, but I enjoyed it so much. That 1 year and being in a Muslim country, hearing the azan, just having people, assalamu alaikum, assalamu. It was just so wonderful there, and the people were so kind and friendly.
So you stayed on?
I stayed on. So I came back briefly back to England for about a year, or a few months actually, after a year of being in Sudan, and then went back to Sudan and stayed in Sudan 13, 14 years, and working as a teacher, working as a journalist, and really enjoying the time that I was there. Because the Sudanese are so hospitable. And so, therefore, Arabic became, for me, a second language, but with a Sudanese dialect and a Sudanese accent.
And of course, learning Arabic makes it a lot easier to study Islam, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I spent, during the time I was in Sudan, studying under a sheikh every single day, apart from Fridays. And at the beginning of all of that, because I didn't understand a lot of what was going on, I used to have a small tape and tape the sheikh, and then go home and discuss what the sheikh said, and then play it to people. Said, "What did he say here? What did he say here?" But eventually, after about 3-4 months, and that's really how quick it was, I could understand. And traditional learning is so good, brother, because what traditional learning does, it gives you a textbook. And you have that text that you can learn. So you're learning Arabic through the text that you're reading, and you're also getting the explanation from the knowledgeable people who know that. And so, alhamdulillah, I was very fortunate to spend my time. And I used to also run an English teaching school, but I used to leave the school every single day between Dhuhr and Asr, and then come back to work. To study with the Sheikh every single day.
I usually ask the brothers and the sisters I interview about how they were perceived or how they were received by the Muslim community in their locality. I don't know whether this question applies to you or not, because you went to Sudan and you were in a Muslim country. But was there any special experience with the Muslim community in London, in North London, where you were?
I have to say that I was became Muslim during a time that was very volatile in terms of the different groups of the Muslim community. So there were different groupings that were quite combattory. They were very combative at that time, and I felt at the time it wasn't so much the non-Muslims that caused the difficulty for me being in the UK. It was the friction that was happening
among the Muslims.
Subhanallah. And I feel that's why I felt I needed to leave and make hijrah and go somewhere else and learn better my religion, because there were so many conflicting opinions about what was and what should be and the way people should practice Islam. And so I found a great strength moving away from all of that and learning in the Sudan. And of course, when some of the groups are saying, well, why would you go to Sudan? Sudan's a country where they do all this kind of strange things and this kind of stuff. And I didn't find it that way. I found it a great country in terms of the way that people lived, and it was just living Islam. So I was highly respected, highly prized for being an English teacher and being a journalist out there, and it became my second home. Now, funny enough, I came back to the UK, and when I came back to the UK, there was a...
You mean after the 14 years?
After the 14 years or so, I came back to the UK, and there was a tremendous there's a tremendous feeling of feeling low about being back in the UK.
Because that's after 2011.
That's correct.
2001.
Yes, no, it's after 2012 I came back, roughly. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
all the 2001, all the 9/11 stuff. I was in Sudan.
You did not witness it here.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I was away.
Yeah, but that was 2012. That was the nearly the height of the Arab revolutions.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was that time. So there was a lot of pressure, not because of the Arab revolutions, but of course, a lot of pressure around being Muslim. And I felt weighed down by it. I felt that, you see, culturally, you live with people who are Muslims, you develop, their attitudes and whatnot. So it's very difficult in the beginning to adjust to.
Yeah, probably because of the transfer.
Yeah.
You come from a majority Muslim country to England.
Absolutely. I mean, for example, in Sudan, being my age, if you get on public transport, okay, it's impossible. The whole bus will get up and say, "Oh, come and sit, Sheikh, Ustaz," and everybody would offer you a seat. And there were times in the UK when I was just beat, really tired, and really hoping someone might give me their seat. Because I was ill at that time. I wasn't as well as I am now, and I was really looking for that kind of assistance, but it didn't come. So rather, I saw young children sitting in chairs, which was impossible in the Arab world in that sense. So, it was very different. It was very, very different. It was very unusual. I had to get used to being inside, for example, back to being inside four walls again, because we lived very much in the open in the Sudan. So, and it was very hot there. So, coming back and feeling the cold, it was quite an experience. But I think generally having to justify your existence as a Muslim became very, very difficult for me. Always trying to justify why you decided to, and look what the Muslims are doing, etc. But I've always been very, very confident about Islam and about Muslims, and I'm not one of those people who think that Islam is going down the pan. I look and I'm amazed how many people are still coming to Islam, how many people are being persuaded that this is the way of life that they want to choose and what they want to do. And so for me, it's good news and still continues to be good news around everything that's happening for Islam. Let's put aside, my own personal experience as a Muslim. I'm being very, very well treated, alhamdulillah. But, in general, I've seen so many people just flourish. Their lives have become, so much better. Their parents have poured out their love to them, and they've been just better people, with good characters. And there's nothing better for me to see and live around, good people, good Muslims. Alhamdulillah.
What a good note to end on. شكرا جزيلا. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you.
Allah يسلم. Thank you very much indeed. Barakallah fi.